In this video, I want to do a hands-on side-by-side comparison between the MagMod Beauty Dish versus the 24-inch MagBox. Let's get it. Hello, my friends. My name is Pi. Welcome to another MagMod tutorial. Let's get right into this. Look, when I first started in photography, if you handed me a beauty dish and a softbox, and they're roughly the same size, the first question I'd be asking is, what are the differences between these two modifiers? This is exactly what I want to do in this video. Let's do a side-by-side comparison comparing the MagMod Beauty Dish to the MagBox 24-inch softbox, which are roughly about the same size. And we're going to compare them across three different areas. Number one, how about size and portability? What are the differences? Number two, well, what about light control? Number three, light quality. What are the differences in the actual quality of light on a subject's face? Number one, ease of use, portability, design. I mean, both of these modifiers are incredibly easy to use. When it comes to the MagMod Beauty Dish, a simple pop and it's right out of the case, ready to go. And when it comes to the softbox, it's very similar. You're gonna push and extend, everything snaps into place and you're done. So really when it comes to ease of use, I'd say they're kind of identical across the board. But when it comes specifically to size and portability, I do think the MagMod Beauty Dish might have a bit of an edge here. Now, both are very small and portable. This is the entire case that houses the softbox and your modifiers. Could you get into a piece of luggage? Yes, probably a bigger piece of luggage, but it will fit. However, the MagMod Beauty Dish, while it's relatively large and circular, it's very flat. And this low profile makes it a bit easier just to move around if you're on the go quite a bit, okay? So a slight advantage there in terms of the MagMod Beauty Dish, but otherwise, both are fantastic, highly portable, very easy to use. Let's go on to number two, our side-by-side comparisons for light control. Let's take a look at the overall pattern that's gonna be falling onto our subject and the background with both these modifiers. Helping me out is Kiara. We're gonna link her up. I'm sure you guys know her by now, but we're gonna link her in case you wanna give her a follow. For our light, we have the ProPhoto B10 on a C-stand, and it's boomed in roughly 45 degrees, maybe off the camera angle, so we can see some direction of light, okay? Again, use any light that you guys would like. This is what I'm using. Same principles apply regardless. With the MagBox Pro 24 Octa, I have it placed right on here. It's maybe, I would say like 4 feet from our subject's face. And I also have the diffusion on just because it's not that common to shoot with a softbox without any diffusion whatsoever, because that basically just becomes a bare flash. In kind of contrast, a beauty dish you can use without any sort of diffusion, okay? So let's go ahead and take this shot. My Canon R5 is just placed onto a tripod so I can get the exact same shot both times. We're not doing anything crazy composition-wise. I'm actually shooting quite wide so you can see the light in the frame, so that way we can compare the light control and the differences in patterns between shots. Okay, 1/200 f4, ISO 400, let's take that shot, and there we go. Let's pop the beauty dish on. So with the beauty dish, we have a couple different types of modifiers. I'm gonna start just bare because that is a common look, and people often use beauty dishes for that bit of specularity. We'll talk about that light quality differences in just a minute, but we have basically three different variations here in terms of light control. All right, so beauty dish bare. Let's go ahead and take a look. Perfect. Putting these side by side, there's a very clear difference right off the bat. We're getting not only a more specular light, which means that it's kind of more reflective, more direct. That's because of the silver lining of the beauty dish, but we're also getting a lot more light output. This is because there's no diffusion layer. So now let's go ahead and add the diffusion layer onto the beauty dish and do another comparison. Now with the sock on the beauty dish, let's take another shot. Again, same settings across the board. Okay, side by side, bare beauty dish versus the Sont beauty dish. There's of course some pretty clear differences. The first being just brightness. We lost a little bit of light, of course, which happens whenever we diffuse light. We also got a much more gradual pattern in terms of where the light lands and that graduation from shadow to highlight. You can also see a little bit of difference in terms of the actual shape of the shadows that are coming off of Kiara as well. Now let's take a look at the softbox with diffusion versus the beauty dish with the sock. Here, you're not gonna expect there to be too much of a difference because they're both roughly the same size of modifier, they're both at the same distance, but we do see some subtle differences here, okay? Subtle differences, I'm noticing at least the biggest one to me is the graduation in lighting between shadows and highlight. It seems to be just a little bit more even and more circular with the beauty dish, which makes sense because of its shape. And personally, this is where I kind of prefer the look of a Beauty Dish a little more because it feels a bit more natural than the shape of, say, an Octa box. But very subtle difference there. Now let's go to our last layer of light control. Let's add a grid onto both the Beauty Dish and onto the softbox. Now here's another option when it comes to the Beauty Dish. I can go sock and then add the grid, or I can put the grid on first and then add the sock. You'll get a little bit of a difference in terms of light control and quality. Here we're going to diffuse it and then control the light output, so this is more control. But if you want to have a little bit more of a feathered edge, you can go to grid first and then sock. It's just another layer of kind of light control that you get with a Beauty Dish versus a softbox, because we're not going to get that with a softbox. With the MagBox, we're going to be placing the grid over the diffusion layer, and that's the only option we really get with that. Okay, so because of that, let's go ahead and set this up the same way that we would the MagBox, which is sock and then the grid. We've left all the power settings, camera settings, everything's identical, so we're looking at exactly what these modifiers are doing. The first thing we notice between just the diffused Beauty Dish versus now the gridded Beauty Dish, not only has it gotten a lot darker, even over skin tones where the light is directly aimed, it's quite a bit darker, but we have tons of light control. We can see that funneled circular light pattern, and we're controlling all the spill. So you notice everything around her is getting quite dark. We have a lot of light control with this setup, and that's fantastic. Let's now compare this to the gridded softbox. Okay, same everything. There you go, Kiara, that's perfect. This is exactly what I expected. With the gridded Beauty Dish, we have a little bit better light control than with the gridded softbox. Both are great, by the way, but if we put these side by side, you'll notice the light pattern on that gridded Beauty Dish is a bit tighter. We're not hitting as much of the background. It's also a bit more circular. This goes back to, number one, the shape of the modifier itself, but also the actual grid type that's going over the modifier. On that softbox, you'll notice that the grid modifier is a bit more of a larger egg crate style versus the very tight and uniform grid that goes directly over the front of that Beauty Dish. So we get a bit better light control with the Beauty Dish. Now, bonus, let's go and flip the sock and the grid on the Beauty Dish and show you the difference there. Previously, it was sock and then grid. Now we're gonna flip-flop it. As you get more practice with off-camera flash and modification, you can already start to guess what's gonna happen based on your different choices. Like here, if we put the grid underneath and then the diffuser on the outside, what we should get is light control, but a little bit more of a spread than we had in the first one because the diffusion is coming second. Let's take that shot. Now that is exactly what we get, but we also get a much darker image. So we're losing a lot more power in this, which means that we're gonna have to compensate for that. I don't want you guys to have to compare these two images side by side without them being roughly the same. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm gonna bring that power up quite a bit. We're gonna go up 2 stops on that light and take the same shot again. Okay, so with that combination, we basically had to go up 3 stops of light on the flash just to have a little comparison. But let's do a quick 3-way side by side. And what you'll notice in this is 3 different layers of basically light control. The most light control with diffusion is essentially the sock and then the grid option. That grid and then sock is kind of like an in-between. So we have a lot of control and variability with that Beauty Dish, and it's one of the things that I love about it. Let's do one last one. We're gonna do the Beauty Dish with just the grid now. So with this, we essentially have 4 layers of light control that's kind of built into this modifier. I'm gonna go ahead and dial the power back down. So let's bring it back to where it was with all the other shots, and let's take another shot again. That was about 3 stops lower. Perfect. So now let's do a 4-way side by side. We've got the Beauty Dish with just a sock. This gives us a beautiful pattern against the wall that's kind of nice, circular, really great looking light. Then we have the Beauty Dish with the grid and then the sock. This is kind of an in-between. We have a little bit more of light being funneled forward, but that diffuser, that sock, is kind of evening out the pattern more. Then we have another layer. This time we go sock and then grid. Now we have a diffused light source that is very directed toward our subject. We get a lot of light control there. And finally, this 4th image, this is just the grid. Now we have a hard and specular light with tons of light control. This is what I love most about the Beauty Dish. It's such a versatile modifier. With a single modifier, we have 4 different options of control just when it comes between bare versus grid versus socked, and then the combinations thereof. Let's keep going. Part 3, let's get into the differences now between light quality. So for this, we've gone to a different setup. We're gonna do a headshot setup. This is a very typical clamshell lighting setup. Reflector on bottom. We have the MagBox, our primary light, right up top. It's set up in a butterfly light configuration. So that means that it's coming directly top down, and we're kind of lighting the face directly. I'm not gonna worry about posing or anything. I want Kiara to look directly into the camera so we can look and see exactly what's happening in skin. Like we can see the reflective nature of it, the quality of light, everything. Let's go ahead and take our first shot. We're gonna leave our settings identical across the board. We're at 1/200, f5.6, and ISO 400. Here's our first shot with the softbox and just the diffusion layer. Let's go ahead and, since that's up, let's just add our grid right now. Are we gonna get as much kickback now? No, we might not even get any at all, because with the grid on, we have a lot more light control, right? So we're not gonna see too much bouncing off that reflector. But you know what? Why don't I stop talking and just show you? Comparing these two images, you'll notice that of course the background got quite a bit darker because we're controlling that light more. We do still get a tiny bit of light reflecting off of this reflector, but it's not nearly as much as in the first shot. Also, I want you to pay attention. If we go in close in both these shots, you can see kind of a telltale sign of an Octa, which is the actual shape of that light modifier in the eye. That's gonna be one of our kind of comparison points. All right, we got the softbox. Let's get the Beauty Dish on. Our first shot, the socked Beauty Dish. Honestly, this is very comparable to just the softbox with diffusion, right? You might see a little bit more specularity in the light quality. And what that means is you see more light directly coming back to the camera, or it's more reflective. That means on skin, you're gonna see a little bit more of the highlights, and that's nice. It's kind of a look in and of itself. But really, probably the strongest difference, the telltale difference between these two modifiers is gonna be in the catchlights. And for that, we gotta zoom in pretty close to see that, but zooming into the eyes going side by side, this is where you can see the telltale donut shape of the Beauty Dish.
Donut.
Now let's add the grid. I'm gonna try to do this while it's up there. Oh my goodness. The magnets made that possible, y'all. Magnets.
Magnets!
All right, right there with the grid. Remember what we said earlier, with the Beauty Dish and that tighter grid that goes directly over the modifier, we get a lot more light control, right? We see that in this shot. Look at how dark the background is. In fact, let's put these up side by side. So here's the softbox with grid versus the Beauty Dish with grid. Look at how much darker the background is. Look at how even in the catchlights of the eyes, with the grid on that Beauty Dish, we see none of that reflector. We see darker skin tones, darker shadows overall. So what this tells us is that we just have a lot more light control with this setup than with that gridded softbox setup. Both are fantastic, but more light control with that Beauty Dish. Now watch this. We just compared those two setups, right? The same two setups you get on a softbox. We still have more setups on the Beauty Dish. So let's go ahead and go bare. Let's also do bare with the grid. Let's show you what that looks like. This is our Beauty Dish Direct. Now this is the quintessential Beauty Dish look. And what I love about it is that you get a relatively soft light that's also specular. It's soft because the size of this modifier is fairly large, right? It's still pretty big in relation to how close it is to our subject. So that makes it fairly soft. But it's specular because of that silver lining on the inside. So you get a look with this that you just wouldn't get with the softbox. And we can see that when we go side by side, just the MagBox versus the Beauty Dish bare. It looks quite a bit different. And I love that about the Beauty Dish because again, we have all those other options there. We can make it look more like a softbox if we wanted to. But enough talking, let's throw that grid on and see what that looks like. Now, as soon as we have that grid, we lose quite a bit of light. So I'm gonna go back up to ISO 400. But again, the light control on this is phenomenal. So now with just the grid and the bare Beauty Dish, we have that kind of soft but also specular light, but now it's controlled and funneled forward. From these exercises, I'm hoping you see the versatility in the Beauty Dish because let's go ahead and put those up, right? We had the bare Beauty Dish, which gives us that kind of soft but also specular light. We had the bare Beauty Dish with grid, which gives the same quality of light but now funneled and tunneled in. We have the sock and then grid, which creates a diffused but also very controlled light, kind of in between and very much close to a softbox. Each one of these is a little bit different, and I love that versatility in the Beauty Dish when compared to just a traditional softbox. Both are fantastic, but I'm really excited about that guy. I hope this comparison was helpful. Remember, with both these modifiers, you can still modify light color as well with MagMod gels. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video and the comparison, let me know down below. Let me know if something was kind of insightful, useful, helpful. If you have questions, let me know that as well, and I'll be looking out. I try my best to respond to all of your comments, and I get lots of ideas for future videos from your comments as well. As always, we're gonna link up all the gear that we use in the description of the video. That's it. Okay, bye.